I editorialised there a little around water. You and I have spoken about this issue before. It goes to the sclerotic nature of developing crucial infrastructure, not just in New South Wales, but I would argue all around Australia. Often environmental laws and special frogs and all sorts of things get in the way of building a new dam. Warragamba was Sydney's last big dam. You're a New South Wales politician. The population since that was opened in 1960 has more than doubled in Sydney, and yet about the only new infrastructure we've got to supply water is an expensive, arguably environmentally damaging desal plant. We've got to do better than this, don't we?
Well, absolutely, Michael, but water security policy in New South Wales is a hopeless paradox because we haven't built a new dam, a drinking water dam, for 33 years. But at the end of the end of this year, we're told that in the name of renewable energy, they're going to be building dozens of pumped hydro facilities. So that's a dam on top of the hill, a dam at the bottom of the hill, and the pipe to pump it up and down. So apparently it's easy to build dams under Matt Keane's renewable energy policy. But if you want to do something for genuine water security, drinking water in country New South Wales, for instance, and also the important water flows for farmers that we need out of the Murray-Darling, that's all a no-go zone because of the environmental concerns. So none of that makes any sense. And we need a much clearer perspective on water policy in this state.
Well, we need some policy, I think, before we get a clearer perspective. But, I mean, the other issue, and you mentioned the farmers. I mean, I mentioned it before also, the privatisation aspect of water. I mean, I understand water is a commodity, and for farmers that have surplus, well, it's a good idea. They can make some extra money if they can, in essence, sell that surplus to the bloke downstream that doesn't have enough. You can make a quid out of it. But we've allowed, and I think I'm right in saying it was under Malcolm Turnbull when he was the federal water minister, we've allowed people with no connection to land whatsoever to buy water, to in essence store it and park it until they get a price they're wanting before they offshoot it. Now, that's often in a period of drought when farmers have got their back against the wall anyway. How the hell was that ever allowed to happen, the separation of water and land ownership?
Well, it beggars belief. Landowners should own the water on their own property. If they want to buy more, good luck to them. But you shouldn't have overseas-owned companies, like the Chinese-owned companies that are effectively water market speculators, holding back the product to see the price rise higher for no valid economic purpose other than speculation. So it's one of the national security issues we've got to address. We've got to take stronger and clearer control of our natural assets as a nation. And when it comes to water, farmer and town drinking water has got to come first, and environmental flows and, from my perspective, the South Australian arguments have got to come second and third. So we've got it upside down in New South Wales, unfortunately. When you've got speculators in the market, it just makes it worse.
Now, just before I leave you there, Mark, I'll speak to Margie Osmond in just a second. I think I know what she's going to say because I've spoken to her many times before about this problem with the tourism industry and COVID. But she's made the point to me on radio many times before, we need a national approach to the border issue. We can't go on having 140 or something cases at Avalon and having people at Burke or wherever locked out of Perth. I mean, this ad hoc, state by state, often very self-interested political situation surely has to end because, like with any industry, tourism certainly needs certainty going forward if it's to be profitable.
Yeah, Michael, it's been one of the great flaws of the National Cabinet. You know, I was sceptical about the National Cabinet because it's elevated these premiers now to huge national figures. And we haven't seen this in Australia since the time of Jack Lang 90 years ago, where the Premier, in many respects, is more important than the Prime Minister. So they've been elevated, and Palaszczuk in Queensland particularly, you'll see McGowan do the same thing, have manipulated border policy because they've got electoral reasons, elections coming up. So the National Cabinet hasn't been national in its approach to borders, hasn't been a cabinet because they all argue with each other. And quite frankly, the national government, the Australian government, should have said at the very beginning, as a basic matter of national sovereignty and the movement of people within our nation, the Australian government's got control of our external and internal borders and no one else. Yeah. And that should have been the constitutional position. we would have had a consistent policy and none of this electoral politics being played at the massive expense, not only of the tourism industry, but people who've got sick relatives and just want to have the normal human compassionate experience of visiting a dying father, a sick mother, other grandparents who are sick, and on their way out. So all of that has been lost as the premiers have played politics.
Well, it's done very well for them domestically, but from a national point of view, I think it's kneecapped. It's great to talk to you, Mark. Next time we'll mention the N-word, nuclear. Have a wonderful new year.
You too. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, my pleasure. Mark Latham there.